Hey guys, Steak here for Games Defined, and in this tutorial we're going to learn to make a normals map again, exactly like we did last week, except for this time we're going to use xNormal, which is a third-party software, which is this right here. So let's get started. So the first thing we need to do is have a low poly and high poly version of our models, just like we did last week. The low poly version needs to be unwrapped, so I'll just show you my unwrap. Again, fairly simple to see how I did it, front, back, sides, you know the rest of that. The high poly, to my knowledge, doesn't need to be unwrapped, so once you've got that, first thing you have to do is make sure they're in exactly the same place, so I just center align them. We need to select the low poly object, come down in the modifier list to projection, so we need to make a cage that comes past the high poly detail. So in the cage layout I just have shaded on and move the amount up like that. As you can see it changing, as long as it totally overlaps the front, because that's where all the detail is. The rest of it doesn't need to be that high out, that far out really, so you can alter it if you want. In fact, I'm not going to bother because it's not really that important. So once you've got the cage, in the cage rollout, select export and name it whatever you want. It will say this, yeah, that will do. And then right click the projection modifier bit and collapse all, because we don't need it anymore. Now press H to bring up this menu, click the cage, come up to this button here, the menu, export, the little arrow thing, click export selected, and wherever you want to save it as an OBJ. I'm just going to overwrite the ones I've already got. Yes, press yes, export, done. You want to do the same for all the other things as well, right there. Export, low poly, yeah, same. And then the same for the high poly version. High poly, replace, yeah, export. So next in xNormal, if you come to the high definition meshes, you can either drag and drop the OBJ in, or just right click, add meshes, and then find your OBJ, high poly. The same for the low definition mesh. Once you've done that, right click, browse external cage file, and click your cage. Yeah, this will come up. So your cage and your low poly object has got to have the same topology. So in this case we won't get any errors because we made the cage from the low poly object, so there'll be no worries there. Just press OK. Just take note of the maximum frontal ray distance and the maximum rear ray distance, both at 0.5. If we come down to tools, click ray distance calculator, click go. This just calculates the distance between the high poly and the low poly mesh. So you can see these numbers going up, and about after 10 to 20 seconds I don't see any difference, so I just let it get to 20 seconds and then stop it, because it's not going to change at all. So you click copy results and then close. If you come up to the low definition meshes again, you'll see these numbers have changed, which were the numbers that were coming up in the ray distance calculator. The others aren't really needed except for baking options. This is where you choose to save it. Mine's on my desktop. The size, whatever size you want. It's not really that big, so I'll just leave it at 1024. The edge padding is the amount of pixels that are further out than your UV, which is kind of like a safety measure, just so that you don't see any parts of your mesh where the normals map is, where it's stopped. So I usually have it at 2. It's by default it's at 16, so I just put it down to 2. I just leave these as they are. Renderer, I have the default bucket renderer. CUDA renderer is best if you got high specs and a really good up-to-date graphics card, but it doesn't support anti-aliasing, so I just have it at default and 4 times. You want to click normal map. If you can do the others, but I never do. I just do them separately, and that is all you need. So next, just click generate maps and let it generate. Yeah, I've already made one, so it's going to overwrite it. So that's the low poly normals map made. Just close that, and if you want to do a ambient occlusion map, you can. I'm not going to because I'm not really fussed. So now back into 3ds Max. If you select the low poly one and just isolate it, Alt Q, like that. I don't know why I've got those on. I hate having those on. And then come up into the material editor and come under maps, then bump, then normal bump, then click none again and click bitmap. Find your bump map, which is that for me. Press open, and then sometimes you'll see it on here, sometimes I don't understand why. But if you go back with this, go to parent, you can change the intensity, so put up to 2.5, and then hold shift and F gets the safe frames. In fact, I'm gonna come out of that. I'm gonna delete the cage, don't need the cage, and then put them next to each other so you can compare them. And then render. As you can see, it's not really that great. I'm not entirely sure why, but I'm not going to go over it again. You know what the steps are. So that is basically how you make a normals map with xNormals. I hope you've learnt a lot. I hope you learned from the mistake I clearly made with this awful render. But yeah, you'll get the hang of it, and I'll see you next week for another one. Thanks for watching.